Yeah.
I'll leave it to you, David. Whatever you reckon.
She said for young. They're just developing.
You ready to pull our ideas on this? Or do you need a little bit more time? When I've done this with grade 4, I've usually come up with quite a lot of things in about a quarter of an hour. So we're sprinting. We're sprinting through this. We need to be a lot longer to think about it. Right, well let's... If it was a class of grade 4 or 5, I would get people to come out and put their ideas on the board. Everybody likes to put their idea on the board, I find, in primary, in elementary, so it's a good kind of activity. But I'll just play scribe tonight, but I would do it that way. I would get people. Or if there's someone who's really good at board work, they're the board monitor. They can come out and kids say their idea, and then they see their idea on the board, which everybody likes to see. That, you know, that's a good thing to do in terms of the dynamics of this kind of thing. So I'd have a scribe, but we won't today. We'd have a scribe, or we'd have kids come out. So what ideas occur to you about how the Ted and Teddy seem old? I don't really know anybody's name. Up the back, yep.
They were discussing that they needed taken out and put away, or taken out and put away, as though they had a lot of use.
Yep. So their sense of time, or of long time, or is that what you mean, or do you mean that they're worn out or old and?
Just that they've been through a lot of use.
Yeah. Good. Yep. A lot of use, experience. Yep. And that they. Oh no, here am I butting in. Anyway, anything else about? We're going on old still. Yep.
One of them said, it's been like 4 years since I've seen him, Mark.
Yep. So there's a lot about the past, dwelling on the past. Yep. They dwell on the past. Yep. Oh, sorry, we'll come back to you, but I would normally say, can we have some other suggestions before we come back to that? Anyone else for old?
His Paul was
Yeah, they're kind of worn out. Yep. Yep.
I think I heard them talking about bears aren't made out of straw anymore.
Yeah.
So the materials that they're made out of makes them seem like they're older.
Yep. So that they're kind of old products. I was going to write on them. They're kind of they're sort of. You're not your styrene bear. They're your kind of straw model. The handed down bear through the generations. The inherited bear that families used to have. Anything else?
He couldn't do his tricks like he used to be able to.
Yes. So there's sort of fading skills or something. Fading skill, something like that. Yep. I think another thing that would occur to me is they don't listen to one another. They just, they just wander off into their own little reverie. You know, I'm thinking this, and you know, oops, I'm in a conversation. It kind of surprises another person there. So there's a sense of them.
That could be young too, because young kids don't always listen to each other.
That's exactly what happens. What happens when you do this is you gradually fill the board and you see quite a lot of crossover between the categories. And then you can start saying about, I've used the book in looking at cross-generational stuff, that once you start seeing, you know, that there's lots of ways being really old is a bit similar to being really young. And that you can explore that with kids, because you can then go and say that the young, you know, there's the boasting, you know, and trying to con one another that they know things when they don't. Up the back, yep.
It's kind of like my dad's the boss of your dad sort of thing, you know, my owners and
Yeah.
I'm an owner and so is mine.
Yeah, that's right. Of trying to boss or assert that they are, you know, superior to the other person. You know, I'm, you know, exactly what you said. You know, my family connection's better than your family connections, kind of, like kids. Yep. Anything else that you have for young? Yeah.
Questioning about why, everything is why do you do that?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. Why questions? That's right. Yep. Yes.
Didn't understand the complicated words.
Yeah. And they bluff. They don't understand, but they refuse to pretend. You know, they pretend. Don't understand. And try and bluff their way. Oh, yep. Anything else for the young? Yeah, up the back.
I wasn't real sure that the sense of time might have been off. Like little kids think, well, I haven't been there and,
Yes.
you know.
The time is actually a movable feast when you're really old and when you're really young. You've got no sense of adult notions of time. Yep. So the time. Yeah. And exactly the point that you made, that once you build the board up, you see that there's quite a lot of crossover between the categories. And then it's quite a nice book for looking at the young and the old and cross-generation. I don't know if you have themes on, you know, grandparents or anything like that. It's quite a nice book then to slot into a broader theme like that and look at how both groups need looking after kind of idea, which is a nice way of building that, and they gradually explore it. Then I've subsequently done, which works a treat, is that they bring along a bear or a pet or a toy, and they hold it up and do a kind of ventriloquism of the life history of their pet. Or they can write that or just deliver it as a talk after you've done that kind of thing. And I find that, from my experience of working with about grade 4, grade 5 kids, that works quite well. Either a bear or a pet or something that they can then have as a sort of a life story that they're going to tell, and how the character got any kind of bumps or knocks or whatever happened to them by the time they got put in the washer, or some sort of that you get. So it's a chance, having done this and looking at recalling the past, it's a chance then to use that as a framework for either verbal presentations or a written thing. They can do then a biography or an autobiography of a pet. Because lots of kids don't have teddies anymore. I don't know what it's like in America, but sometimes, you know, they brought along other sorts of things rather than teddies, but they have to be broadly in the category of pet that you've had for a while, or, you know, or toy or something that you would give their history, you know, kind of idea. Okay. I might just sort of have a little break there. Is there anything on the list on either page that you're puzzled over and you wonder what it's about? Some of the things I haven't got the necessary bits and pieces with me here tonight to explain exactly or give you a demonstration, but I can tell you what each of these things are, and I've got in mind 2 or 3 further things to do tonight. Yeah.
The 8-inch fingers.
Yeah, I'd like to do that actually as the next activity, and that works very well too as a discussion thing. Has anyone read that book, Aidan Chambers' book 91? It's called, oops, I can't remember. But if you only wrote one book that year. And it's about working with literature with kids. One thing I have done that works really well, and I don't know if you've done this, is video in the head. If you've ever done anything like that, I can just explain it really briefly. What you do with that one is, if you're starting to read an extended text to kids, like the start of a science fiction novel, I just tell them, close your eyes, and I want you to think about the images that are forming in your mind when you hear me read the first 2 pages of this story. You could do it with a picture book, but it works better with perhaps a more extended text. Close your eyes. I'm going to read you the start of this novel, and I want you to think about what pictures are forming in your head. Is it in colour, black or white? Up to you. What pictures are forming in your head as you hear these words? Why do you think that's a good thing to do? Oh, maybe a lot of you might think it's a good thing to do at all, but does anyone think it is? I'm assuming you might think it is a good thing to do, but do we have any? Why perhaps might that be a good thing to do? In reading the story? Not sure? Well,
Helps for the creating. It's like their imagination, uses their imagination.
Yeah. I think there's now lots of research that effective readers do that as an automatic. You know how you know you're in a book when you start forming mental images? You know you're on the beach or you're reading a novel or something. And often it's hard to read Russian novels because you can't cope with the names and they can block you in terms of forming mental pictures of the characters. Well, you know how you've seen, you've read the book and then you see the film and it jars the whole time because it's interrupting your video in the head and you've got perfectly good images of what these folks are meant to look like and what the setting's meant to be, and here this film is such a weak imitation of your mind. We now know that that building of mental images is really important for getting into reading. And what the value of this activity is, it's kind of like a little prompt for kids who are not particularly good at that, to actually see that that's part of the pleasure of forming your own mental images of a story as you go. That the words have to be used to somehow create your own mental world. And after you've read for a few pages, you can then just say, well, let's have a discussion with the class about what we saw. Invariably, kids will have seen a lot of different things, but that's great from my point of view, because that's like saying literature is about building our own personal worlds, but it's great fun to share these ideas later with people. And you can even have them try and draw something about what they saw and talk about that further. Also, I think with science fiction type stories, often the setting's hard to visualise, and it's good for them to practice consciously trying to build images. It's a good thing to be trying to develop with readers as a skill. So I've done that, and it works well, and kids find it interesting. And they're the experts. They know what they saw. They're the experts. You want to find out what they thought. They're the experts about their mind, and it creates a nice framework then for talking about it, and how different books can create a strong sense of the world that's being created. And it's a good way too to get them thinking about setting. We want them to realise that books are set in places, but if we say close your eyes and just concentrate on where you think this story is happening, what mental pictures are you getting when you hear me read the book, then it's a kind of a manageable way of getting them to think about setting. And it works quite well. Well, my experience is that it works quite well in terms of the feedback. When I've done it with kids or student teachers have used that idea. We'll go on now to Aidan Chambers. This is another thing that works well. Again, I'm using the board because I'm really showing you things that require nil preparation. and that I think relatively easy to organise. Like with these cards, it took me about 3 minutes to read the book and write on these cards. You know, it's not a huge challenge to make that happen and to have the resources. In 1991, in his book, Aidan Chambers says that when we read fiction, whether we're 4 or 84, there's really only 4 things we're interested in. Only 4 things. Whether it's leisure reading, whether it's factual reading, whatever. The 4 things that he thinks interest everybody when they're just reading for fun, the 4 categories. Whether we go to a film or we watch a book, his idea was that we're always interested in what we like, what we didn't like. It was too long. Why didn't they get rid of the last half hour of that film? It's hopeless. We always like to tell our friends or have an opinion on what we didn't like, whether the characters, the timing, whatever. We always are interested in talking about, well, that bit didn't seem to make sense to me. I couldn't. Why did they have that in there? What was the point of that bit? I couldn't see what that was getting at. We're interested in chatting about the bits that puzzle us, and we're also interested in spotting patterns of meaning across the pictures. And you can basically put that on the board and read a story to prep, or to grade 1 through to very secondary, and ask them to fill in each of those boxes. And 6- and 7-year-olds come up with very interesting stuff when they're given this kind of framework. Aidan Chambers said you can have a 40-minute discussion with 6-year-olds if the book's good. And he said one of the things that really interested him when he read Where the Wild Things Are to 6-year-olds is that one little boy said, when they got to the puzzle section, why does the moon keep changing? Why does the moon keep changing where the wild things are? Which is a fantastic question to get from kids, because it's into, that it's a dream world and it's like seasons and in and out of time. He goes, Max on the boat, he goes in and out of time and check the moon. The moon changes in the pictures. It's a lot better for a kid to ask that than for the teacher to tell them. Because as soon as somebody says it's a puzzle, someone else is going to have a view about what the puzzle answer is, what the pattern is. And it's good if then you get someone saying, well, perhaps he just is hopeless at remembering what he did on the previous page. Perhaps he had a purpose in having the moon wane. So I'll read you a story. Now here we've got a little range of options. I wasn't sure. Some of you here last night, I could read. I'm a bit tempted to read The Water Tower right through because I think it'll work nicely. Or another option would be Madeline the Pig, but some of you raced up afterwards last night and found out what happened to Madeline, so I'm not too sure. I wanted to do Madeline the Pig. Or, no, we'll do The Water Tower if that's okay with everyone. I don't think that'll be too awful an experience. So, I said a little bit about this yet last night, but it's the picture book of the year in Australia in... check the year. I think it's 96. The Water Tower. Nobody in Preston could remember when the Water Tower was built or who had built it, but there it stood on Shooters Hill, its iron legs rusted, its egg-shaped tank warped and leaking, casting a long dark shadow across the valley, across Preston itself. One summer afternoon, Spike, Trotter and Bubba D'Angelo met by the service station, and together they went up to the tower for a swim. Spike led the way as usual. My mother says it's dangerous up there, he said, but it's worth it, eh? Bubba puffed on behind. His mother couldn't have cared less where he went. At the summit, Spike stopped to look down on the sweltering town. Suckers, he grinned and headed for the tower. Last summer, a security fence had kept trespassers out, but now the metal posts were twisted and flattened, and barbed wire lay coiled on the ground. You reckon Vandal's done that, Bubba asked, recovering his breath, but Spike was already on the top. Hurry up, he yelled, throwing open the access hatch. It's scorching up here. He pulled his shirt over his head, dropped his shorts and clambered down into the tank. It was dark inside. The dark's got a sort of colour, Bubba said, squatting on the bottom rung of the ladder. It's sort of green like moss, like slimy dead moss. Spike didn't answer except for the ghostly wailing he kept up to the fun of hearing the echo. He might not have been there at all. Spike, Bubba called. Spikey. Still no answer, so Bubba whistled for a while and splashed a bit, but only up to his knees. He didn't particularly like the water. He was only keen on slipping down naked. He wasn't keen on slipping down naked into its murky dark. And from time to time he glanced up at the shaft of sunlight angling in from the open hatch, imagining. At last, Bubba called, Spikey, I'm going up now, I've got to get dressed. He guessed that Spike was somewhere beneath him in the water that eddied and swirled. Bubba stepped out onto the top of the tank. The wind was hot, the glare terrible. Blinking and squinting, he looked about for his towel that had blown to the far side of the tank and hung there, caught on the head of a valve. Maybe I should have stayed down, he muttered to himself, tippy-toeing across the burning metal. With the towel wrapped round him, he looked for his clothes. Spikes were there, wedged beneath the hatch, and he saw his shirt flapping at the top of the ladder. But where were his shorts? He turned round and round, nothing. He dropped on his hands and knees and crept to the side of the tank, yelping with each movement as the burning surface seared. He peered over the side, nothing. He made his way back to the hatch, calling, Hey, are the pants down there? What? Came the response. He repeated the question, then waited, standing on his crumpled shirt, keeping his towel tight round him. Spike's dripping head suddenly appeared. No, he sputtered. Nothing's down there but water, and he pulled himself free of the dark. Bubba looked about him again. Then they're blown away, that's what's happened, I bet. Spike laughed. Doesn't matter, he said, shaking himself, reaching for his clothes. You got your towel, go home in that. Bubba shook his head. No, wait, if my mother finds out I lost my pants, I'm dead. They looked at each other. They knew that this was true. Mum D'Angelo could land a bollock like nobody else in town. I'll go back, Spike volunteered. I'll run the whole way. I'll sneak in through your bedroom window and get you another pair. Top drawer of your dress, right? Bubba nodded. I'll wait here. I'll get back down out of the sun. Will you be long? Spike was already on the ladder. I didn't win the cross country for nothing, did I? I'll run. His last words were lost in the wind. Bubba climbed into the tank. It'll be all right, he muttered, it'll be all right. But when he looked, the bottom rung was a long way from the light, and the water seemed darker, so he stopped halfway and waited. All about him the tower creaked and groaned. That's the heat, he reasoned. The heat, expanding the metal. There was a smell. That's the algae, all rotten and festering. The water eddied and swirled. That's the wind shifting the tower. It's old and rickety. But he was frightened, very frightened, and rung by rung, so as not to shake the ladder, not to disturb anything, he crept upwards toward the sun. When Bubba reached the top, he lifted himself out and squatted a moment, catching his breath, calming his heart. I'll get out of this stupid thing, he said. I'll go and wait in the bushes. So he did. He tied the towel around his stomach, climbed down the outside ladder and hopped across the burning earth to the patchy shade of a grey-leaved bush. I'll be safer here, he thought, though from what exactly he could not imagine. The sun found him wherever he went, spouting blisters on his skin. The hot wind burned his cheeks. How much longer, he wondered. When will he come? Then something moved way up at the top of the tower. Something Bubba couldn't quite make out. Sort of is. Spike, Bubba called. Is that you? No answer. Spike, he whispered, getting up. Spikey. The sun found him. Moving along. Ta-da. When Spike returned, calling and waving his shorts, Bubba stuck his head straight out of the tank. Oh boy, he said, dressing himself, I stayed in there a minute longer, I reckon I would have dissolved. The water's great. I had the best swim. I taught myself to lie on the bottom. I could do it to the count of 120, no lie. 2 minutes. Boy, that was good. Spike's eyes narrowed. This was not like Bubba at all. Go on, he said, shoving him. Show us your fingers, said. Show us the water wrinkles. Come on. Bubba turned away. No time now, he answered. My mother will be worried. You know what a worried she is. She'll be scared something's happened to me, won't she? He shut the hatch with a thud. Deep in the tank, the water eddied and swirled. The end. There's no more. All right. Give you a moment to think about that. Anyone like to suggest something they liked about the story, or assumes it was something you liked?
The picture.
Yep, the pictures. Any reason?
Pardon?
Any reason why you like the pictures?
They were big and they had like nice color.
Yep, colour and... Yep. Anything else that anyone like about the book? Just what you're the experts, I can't.
Great descriptions like, his mother.
Yep, okay. Yep.
It was like adventuring that you didn't know for sure, like a quest.
Yep. Uncertainty about what happened. Yep. Moving along to this slide. What would happen with this is you just go, you go as long as people are interested in asking things. You can feed stuff in too as the teacher. If you think there's something that you find interesting yourself, you don't have to just be the scribe. But it is often, the class do like to get their ideas out on the board, so it works quite well from that point of view. Anything that anyone disliked? about the book.
The ending?
The ending?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That it's, any reason or any particular?
What questions?
Yeah. Too many questions here? Yeah. Anything else?
Some of their eyes were kind of scary.
Yeah, it was a bit, I was saying last night, it's a bit like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you know, you know, people are being recruited by some other team, you know, for evil ways. Yes, sorry, that was
Their eyes. some of
Yeah,
their
eyes.
Scary eyes.
scary eyes, yes. Scary, yep, I agree. I actually don't like the fact, you know, it goes round and round when you're reading it, but it's kind of like the atmosphere, you know, how you notice in the layout that you kind of go, the thing kind of swirls round. So I would say the layout I found annoying. I know they're trying to make it dramatic and creepy by having the, like a tunnel or a circular effect in the layout, but I didn't like that either. I didn't like to, just my own personal thing, I don't like how they put in a sort of a non-Anglo name just to make it sort of contemporary. I don't like those kind of things in picture books because it looks just stuck in there. You know, that they don't make sure that it doesn't just have, you know, standard sort of Anglo-Celtic kind of names, because they do that now in quite a lot of picture books just to make it seem multicultural. I don't like that kind of thing. If there isn't a real reason to do it. But I won't write that. Puzzles.
I think he's carving the right swirl.
Yeah, that's right. Anything else?
The change in the character, I mean,
Yep.
in that.
Yep. Yep.
How come the pictures sometimes don't match the text?
Yeah. Good.
No,
Did that guy ever bring the pants
and what's
back?
at the top of the tower?
The pants,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
What's at the top of the tower?
Or did I miss
Yeah, they, it doesn't look like that big blue Ames tower, but in it, it's just a water tower, you know, kind of Australian water tower. Yep, yep. As a group, do we think there's any reasonable answers to any of those questions? Or do you think it's just a kind of a teasing book that just sort of keeps giving you questions rather than... Not sure? No.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly interesting to get grade 4 or 5 to come up with what they think on those questions. Because in doing this, you're not saying there's a right or wrong answer, you're just sharing the experience of the book. And I guess what you're interested in doing is saying that everyone's input is legitimate, and once we've filled the board, we've got a kind of total picture of what we as a class think of this book. And you can leave it at that, or you can explore it further. If we're trying to sort out any of these puzzles, could anyone see any patterns? Patterns, that is, recurring ideas or repeated things in the book that would help perhaps explain something. Yeah.
Maybe for the swirling thing, because Water Tower has some height and all that, and plus it was open, so the tower would move, and like the wind that would just get inside, would just cause a swirl and the surface of the water.
Yeah. So it could be, and there could be a natural explanation. Yeah.
It could just be, note a major change in the story, in the action. In that water swirl, there was always something that was going to happen that was different.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's good because kids often notice this from science fiction stories. There's kind of a trigger, and the stories will often have a trigger that indicates we're stepping out of the normal world into some more creepy world, you know, that there's some kind of sign, and that's what we're talking about. Again, I like this framework because it's really handing over to the class to think about it rather than the teacher saying that they should, you know, come up with stuff. And I think that works better than you going to class and saying, I've worked out this story and I'm going to tell you, because we know how well that goes for kids. That, you know, doesn't give them any kind of active role. The beauty of this is that it provides a framework then for organising responses to the book in a kind of orderly way. And by having to write things on the board, it slows down the discussion process and allows you to then focus a bit more on what everyone thought. And I know it's very hard to get a full set of responses to any particular text you read, because if you just treat it verbally, it just kind of flows and evaporates. You know, comments kind of evaporate while you watch. Whereas if they're slowed down and fixed on the board, it kind of produces a more usable record of the experience. And it just seems to me it provides a framework then for effective looking at text. Any comments or any points people would like to make about that? Finally, and I've done this often too and it works quite well, we often want kids to write their own books, and yet we need to work out ways in which they can benefit from reading other books, picture books, as models for their own writing. And often it's hard to devise activities that are going to effectively work to get them to see what they would think about when they're writing their own text. You know, they're writing their own picture book for other grade levels or younger kids. And one thing that I've done, and it's not my own idea but it certainly works well, is to hand out a story where you haven't broken it into page breaks. And you ask the class, because a story they don't know, you say, we're going to read this story in about in quarter an hour or how long you're going to give them. But I'd like you to think where you reckon would be good points to have the page breaks to make the story dramatic and interesting to read. But often with a book, where the page break comes is an interesting point for building suspense. And you can demonstrate to the kids with particular books that often the page break is used by the author to create a strong impact and make us want to turn the page. It's part of the old technology of books, you know, you don't scroll, your page turn, and that the page turn can be used to create some interest. What I've done then is just type up the text of a book, and we'll just spend a little bit of time on it just so you get the flavour of the thing. But basically you choose a book that doesn't have much text and that can be useful for demonstrating this idea. Or you could do it, a variant version of this would be to do it with give the pictures out and then get the kids to write the text with pictures. That would be another variation. So what I'd like you to do in pairs or trios is work out where you think it's basically got 13 double pages and a single page at the front and the back. So if you'd just like to give that a few moments thought as to where you think the page breaks would go to make the story interesting. You want to have a go? that by having to actually try and do it themselves, they then start to think about how to convey a story in an interesting way. And it's a lot more effective way for showing them how to build suspense with their own writing if they have a practice go at thinking about it. So, I'll read you the story. Basically, to do this activity, you just need a story they're unlikely to have seen before. What Faust saw. See how you went on the first time. One night, Faust woke up, looked out the window and... saw something very strange. How are we going? With this activity, it's not a matter of getting it necessarily right like what the book's got, but starting to think about how page breaks can be used to build a story. He tried to wake up Mum and Isabel and Clayton, even Dad, but they didn't seem to want to wake up. Faust hid. Faust howled. That woke up Dad. Dad looked everywhere, a little bit clear, but he couldn't see anything strange. It's a good way of showing kids too that there can be a lot of extra than the illustration separate from the story, by getting them to just work with the text first. Bad dog, said Dad, he locked Faust outside. Poor Faust. Soon he was back inside. Bad, bad dog, said Mum. Outside again. No, inside again. Bad, 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 bad dog, said Dad and Mum and Isabel and Clayton. Now Faust was getting angry. It wasn't his fault. He decided to run away. Then they'd be sorry. He was followed. Go away, Bart. Someone else heard him bark too, the dog catcher. Faust fled, but he was tired. After all, he hadn't had much sleep. Off to the pound with you, said the dog catcher. No strays allowed in this neighbourhood. The next morning, Dad and Mum and Isabel and Clayton came to the pound. Faust decided to forgive them and go home. He also decided that the next time he woke up and saw something strange, he'd go back to sleep. So one of the things that can happen from practicing trying to lay out a story in terms of building around 600 pages is some sense of how to build the story. And it's quite a good thing in terms of their understanding of how you make the text dramatic or create a positive effect. And if I just read you this story, you can't get that effect that you get if you have to think about it as a page. We're out of time. I hope you've found some ideas that you'll want to try. And I might be back next year briefly, so if I am back next year, I'll be very happy to hear how any of these ideas went and to get feedback from you on trying these things with classes. Thanks for coming.
What's the family tree?
That's like where a story where there's various characters involved and you build a family tree as the story goes. Yeah.